Welcome everyone to Nerd of the Rings. We've got a very fun and exciting stream for you guys today. We are talking about a brand new, just announced Middle Earth card game. With me today is Bryan Bornmueller. Bryan, you are the designer of this brand new Fellowship of the Ring trick-taking game. Thank you so much for taking the time out and joining us here on what is no doubt a busy day where you guys are announcing this game for the first time.
Yeah, thank you very much. I am really excited to be on your channel in particular. I spent a lot of hours listening to you in the background while designing the games.
Oh,
Feels very fitting.
awesome. That's fantastic. Now, Bryan, I always like to start folks off with the question, how were you introduced to Tolkien? How did you become a Tolkien fan?
Well, I mean, like many of us, through my parents, both my mom and my dad are huge readers, and like I have like a very distinct memory of my dad reading me Lord of the Rings when I was a kid. Like I very clearly can remember like the scene in Moria, like going across the bridge,
Mm.
like my dad reading me that part. And I also very clearly remember being disappointed that Bilbo was not the main character of Lord of the Rings, and like being very disgruntled about the whole Frodo being introduced. I felt upset about that. Um, so
That's
no, that's
really funny because I was kind of the same way. Like I expected Bilbo to play a bigger role, and I
yeah,
was kind of bummed that he didn't.
yeah, yeah. It works out okay in the
Yeah,
end.
yeah.
And then, there like a lot of people when the films came out. I was working at a comic store in Ames, Iowa. Shout out to Mayhem Comics and Games, and they hosted midnight screenings every year, which they like bought the theater and then sold all the tickets to the customers.
Mm.
So it was like the best midnight screening possible because it was not only like the huge fans, but it was like all the community from the store, and we do big giveaways and things
Yeah.
like that. So that really rekindled things for me, despite my college roommate at the time telling me I didn't have to reread the books because they were making movies now. I did anyway.
Now, I don't want to bury the lead too much here because I'm sure folks are excited to, you know, hear more about the game and learn about the game. So I'll go ahead and pull up. This is the box art here, and so it's the Fellowship of the Ring trick taking game. Now, for those unfamiliar, now I'm from the Midwest where euchre is like the regional sport basically. But for those unfamiliar, what explain to us what is a trick taking game?
Yeah, so it's a genre of card games. It's one of the oldest genres of card games, really. There have been trick-taking games for like 500 years.
Mm,
So, euchre in your part of the world, but
yeah,
in other places it's bridge or spades or hearts, or if you're in Europe, maybe it's Doppelkopf or tarot. Like there's countless trick taking games, that are typically played with just a traditional uh, deck of cards. The sort of the couple of twists that my game has is obviously it's set in the Lord of the Rings, and so it's not just using a normal deck of cards. We have
right.
almost 150 special cards in the box here, and then it's also a fully cooperative game. So when you're playing euchre or hearts or spades or something like that, you're trying. Everyone's playing for themselves, and they're trying to get the best score.
Yeah.
And in this game, it's cooperative, and like what makes a card game a trick taking game, right, is it's any game where everybody plays one card, and then based on the rules of the game, one's determined to be the best and to win the trick. And
Yeah.
then depending on the game, sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it was so this is a game I've had to keep my mouth shut for a little while now because I got a chance to demo it. You and I checked it out at Gen Con, and so I
Yeah.
learned how to play it a little bit. And and it did take me a second to flip my mind from, you know, the aggressive, like wanting to win a lot in euchre as
Yep.
opposed to this where you want everyone to win. So you each have certain objectives, you know, as a you know, member of the fellowship, essentially, you know, as one of the good guys, you have to accomplish certain things, and you work together to kind of make sure that you each accomplish the goals in order to move on. And it's kind of neat how you've managed to kind of play out the story of Fellowship of the Ring in a card game.
Yeah.
wh- yeah, I'm curious to hear more about that process of like you know, adapting Lord of the Rings to a card game.
Yeah, I mean, so when you think about any sort of board game or card game that's an adaptation of something else, or you know, in this case, Lord of the Rings, I always sort of think about it either as like it is a pure adaptation where you're trying to follow the story as closely as possible, or you're like building a sandbox
Mm,
where you can do whatever you want. And so this game is very much an adaptation. So we have the game split up into 18 what we call chapters,
yeah.
and each chapter is, you know, a part of the story, and you go through them sequentially. You know, so chapter 1 is Bilbo's birthday, and so the characters and the rules that you have to be there, we want to feel like that part of the story, right? And that was one of the big sort of design things that I wanted to do going into this game, because you know, trick taking games are super old, but they're sort of built on the foundation of, well, you just have this one deck of cards, and you know, maybe it's a little different than the one your neighbor has, but
Yeah.
you know, it's like, well, that all has an ace and a king and a queen, and you know, ranked cards like this. And so it's hard to really make a deck of normal cards feel like you're telling a story,
Yeah.
right? But in the sort of world of modern board games where we can have custom arts and have a deck of cards be whatever we want, it's like, okay, how can we make a trick taking game, this genre of game I really love, feel like a story? And so the two sort of big, I don't know, aha moments I had early on in this was one, that the sort of deck of cards would represent the world.
Mm,
So you can like see on that slide above there, you know, there's the 5 card. That's the 5 of hills. So instead of the suits being like, you know, clubs
oh
and
yeah.
hearts and spades, the suits are all things that make you think of Tolkien, right? So it's hills and mountains and forests and shadows, and also rings. So you know, the ring and its influence on the world plays a big part in the story, and so it plays a big part in the game. And so then the other thing that really unlocked the, you know, making the game feel like you're in the story is the character cards.
Mm,
And so you said everyone has a goal, and so what goal you have is determined by what character card you pick. And so that's both the sort of like the puzzle and the challenge
yeah.
that we got to have in the game, and we also can make whatever knowledge you have of Lord of the Rings, make it easier to understand what the characters' goals are, right? So
Hmm.
Frodo's goals always have to do with collecting rings cards, because obviously that's a big part of what he's doing
Yeah.
in the story, is interacting with the ring. Also, the characters, you'll get to pass cards called exchanging back and forth before the hand. So this is both important to the, like, you know, strategy of the game, helping each other out, giving information, but also we can represent the relationships that
Mm.
characters have. So all the hobbits can exchange with each other. But you know, maybe Gandalf's mostly exchanging with Frodo, because
Ah, yeah.
you know, he's trying to help Frodo more than he's trying to help Pippin,
Right.
at least part in the story.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so and then it was really fun to, so this game just encompasses you know, the first volume, like it's
Right.
just Fellowship of the Ring. So we go from Bilbo's birthday to, you know, the breaking of the Fellowship at the Anduin at the end. So we're able to really go through all the beats of the story, bring in lots of different characters. You know,
Yeah. I was wondering. So, you know, presumably, where my mind goes. Okay, so you're focused on Fellowship, so you can take a more deliberate pace. And presumably that means perhaps we'll see characters that we don't often see in adaptations, like maybe Tom Bombadil, perhaps?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, I'm a big fan, and like I really wanted to have as many characters in there as possible. So there's obviously all the core Fellowship members
Yeah.
get introduced as they get introduced in the story, and you'll use them in lots of the different chapters. Right, Frodo's in almost every chapter. Um, but but yeah, then we have appearances by Tom Bombadil is in there. We've got Goldberry is in
Mm.
there, Farmer Maggot, Gildor, right? Like
Oh,
lots
okay.
of lots of
Glorfindel, maybe?
oh yeah, absolutely. He plays
Yeah.
a huge part for one chapter, and it's great to get to pull in characters that I really like, figure out what's in the sort of rules of the game, and sort of system that we've developed. How do you represent like just how powerful Glorfindel
Mm.
is,
Yeah.
right? And so like he's a really challenging character, but he also really gets to help everyone else out as well. So when he shows up, it's big and impactful
Yeah.
and exciting. So there's I think about 50 characters in
Wow.
the game altogether. And sometimes there's multiple versions of character, right? So we have a
Mm.
Strider card, and then we have a separate Aragorn card.
Oh, cool.
Uh,
Very cool. So what what are some of the challenges you run into, trying to adapt a story like this to a trick-taking game? I'm sure there's, you mentioned, making it feel thematic and the relationships making sense, the abilities making sense. What are some of the tough decisions that you ran into while designing this?
So the original game I sort of had in mind was just going to be like a one-off, you play a couple of hands and you're done sort of game where I designed what is essentially now chapter 13, like the Fellowship departing Rivendell, where you have
Yeah.
like all nine of them. And so I like designed those the core nine characters of the Fellowship first, sort of how they interacted and what design space I needed to make them feel good, and like got that feeling really good, and then realized that as soon as I showed it to someone who hadn't played dozens and dozens of trick taking games, they were totally overwhelmed by all the rules and all. Like
Mm.
it's like, okay, choose which character you want for the round. You have nine choices, and let me explain all of them to you.
Yeah.
And it was a little overwhelming for people to jump right into, and that's sort of where we got the idea of like, okay, let's break this up into more of the story, and more of the
Yeah.
story quickly became all of the story. So it's like, well, if we just start out when things are a little simpler in the story, we can still have it be thematic and correct,
Yeah.
and it's Frodo and Bilbo and Gandalf at the beginning, and we can sort of teach you some of the different goals that you will see. So then, as you progress through, we can make things more difficult and
Mm.
add one or two new things every hand you play, and then by the time you get to chapter 13, it's fun and challenging, but it also kind of it flows and
Yeah.
makes sense. So
So the cards kind of change each chapter. You get new elements to the gameplay, like new characters pop in when they, presumably when they pop in the story.
yes, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely, and it was a challenge, but also a great benefit that we sort of had a target of where we wanted to get to. Of like, okay, we
Yeah.
want to get to all of these characters. So that means like like I said, there's Strider and Aragorn. So Strider is maybe a little bit easier version of what the Aragorn card will be. So
Mm.
you wrap your head around Strider when we introduce Aragorn. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, maybe I can do this, right? And it's one of uh, the feelings in the game that I think makes it feel so thematic. Is a lot of times, you'll be in this situation and it'll be like, oh, this is totally impossible and hopeless. Like, there's no way we're going to win this hand. But then you figure it out together and you get through, and
Oh, cool.
it's great.
Now, we obviously mentioned characters that often get, cut or something from adaptations that you're able to include here because of the nature of the card game. Um, were there any things that you came across as you're developing this, that were kind of beneficial because it is a card game, you know, aside from just the characters? Like, what kind of unique opportunities are there in a card game, you know, for adapting Middle Earth?
Yeah, I mean, we have like, because it's a card game, you know, like we get to have a beautiful piece of art, you know, just right
Mm,
in the middle of the card, that, you know, that we have total control over, and we
yeah.
have a great artist. Her name's Elaine Ryan, like, who's also was a huge Tolkien fan, and once we sort of all had dialed in on this sort of stained glass inspired artwork,
Yeah.
like she just like every couple of weeks there'd be something. My art director Bree would have a new amazing piece of art in the inbox uh, for us to look at.
Yeah,
um,
I was really taken aback by the stained glass is a really inspired choice, I think, and yeah, it has some really beautiful elements to it. Like, I noticed, you know, Galadriel, her eyes kinda reflect the stars. We know, you know, the famous example in the movies, how they use the star, lighting, you know, to reflect
yeah.
that, and I just now noticed this as I was looking at this Galadriel piece that, you
Oh
know.
yeah, there. It's the art is full of all of these amazing details,
Yeah,
and like it's really wonderful, and you know, like it's a challenge adapting something, but it's also really inspiring
yeah,
adapting something where you know it's that classic thing when you're making something. A blank piece of paper is really intimidating, but when you've got some constraints, it can be really inspiring on what should it do, right? Like
yeah,
how how should uh how should this character work? It's like, well, I already, you know something about Elrond,
yeah,
right? So it's like, what's gonna feel? It's like, oh, it's Elrond. It's a council of Elrond. So like when he's in the chapter, everybody passes cards around the table at the beginning.
mm,
Like it's like, how can we sort of represent
the
what he's all
coming
about?
together. Yeah, yeah,
Yep. And then and themes too, right? So a lot of the elves in the game, their goals have something to do with the forest suit, and the dwarves have something to do with the mountain suit. And
mm,
you know, we can sort of take this world and language of Tolkien that a lot of people already know, and it's like, okay, and then make sure that the rules of our game are as consistent with that as we can
yeah,
have as
yeah.
well.
Now, you mentioned the, kind of the adaptation versus sandbox approach.
Yeah,
Yeah, tell me a bit more about that. You mentioned briefly that, you know, that yours is clearly an adaptation. Um,
yeah.
you know.
So like if you think about, there's lots of video games and board games, right, where it's like you can do whatever you want, you can go
Mm,
anywhere, you can do anything. Like the in the board gaming world, the War of the Ring game, right, where it's
oh
like,
yeah,
oh, one side's playing all the freed peoples, side's playing all the shadows, but it's like maybe you win by having Gondor invade Mordor, right?
right,
Like
yeah,
you can do that, which is fun. But in the Fellowship of the Ring trick taking game, right, you're going to follow the story, and you're going to
story.
see all of the sort of beats that you recognize, which I think has its own sort of pleasure as
Yeah,
well, where you get to see the story unfold, and you get to see all of the characters, and I hope part of the fun is if people are playing through, they're they kind of know what's happening next, but it's like, oh, but how 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 are they going to do the Balrog? Like,
right.
what's that going to be like when you get there?
Well, and imagine, uh, you know, it still varies, you know, over, you know, repeated play. Like, you go back and play,
Oh,
you know, you might arrive at the same conclusion of the story, but how you go about, you know, handling the Balrog and things like that that you're talking about, I would imagine you could get there very different ways.
oh yeah. I mean, I've played this. My wonderful developer Taylor has played this hundreds of times. Right, you're still shuffling a deck of cards and dealing it out, and the way that deal goes is going to drastically change. How every chapter feels, and how it plays out. So
Yeah,
it's a story that's designed for you to sort of go through, but you can replay it. You can play the chapters in any order, and we even have rules at the end of the rule book We call it the Road Goes Ever On, where you can just like mix up the characters, and it's like, oh, depending on how many people you have, just deal this many random characters, and you can kind of have the, what happens if we have Glorfindel and Arwen and Elrond all in the same hand, right? You can, it works. You can do that if you want as well. If you want to just keep playing forever.
Yeah. So that's kind of a little bonus feature there. Well, let's talk a little bit about, kind of get into the nuts and bolts of how the trick taking game works. We kind of touched on it very briefly there, but I think for folks, who might want to hear a little bit more, like how will gameplay go in this? So what, whether it's taking us through like the first round kind of thing, what kind of things are we trying to accomplish?
Yeah, so whenever you want to play, you start with one of these chapter cards, right? And so the chapter is going to explain both what characters you use and any other special rules there might be. So this is for chapter 1, a long expected party. And we have like a little book quote on the back too, if you want to remind yourself.
Book quotes are always fun to throw.
Yeah, I mean, at first I was like, should I write a summary of these things? And I got intimidated, and then went with quotes instead. And so, like, for the first one, you'll use Bilbo and Gandalf and Frodo and Pippin. And so, like, you have to use... So those are the characters. You'll sort of put those out in the middle of the table. And then you're going to shuffle up the main deck of cards, right? And so what's in there? It's not very complicated. So there's 4 suits that go from 1 to 8. So there's the Hills suits, which has kind of a little hobbit door on it. And there's a suit of mountains that goes from 1 to 8. It's got a little mountain peak, kind of gray. And you've got the forest suit that again goes from 1 to 8. It's got the kind of elvish leaf symbol. Yeah. And then we have a suit called Shadow, which has got the Mount Doom on it there. And usually the heroes are not one thing, that's usually not part of their goals. So
yeah, that makes sense.
So there's those 4 suits that are each from 1 to 8. And then there's the special ring suit that goes from 1 to 5, with, of course, the one of rings being...
I was going to say, special. I noticed it's different. Yeah.
Yeah. So if people have played trick-taking games, the only trump in this game is the one of rings. So when it's played, it can win any trick.
Gotcha.
But, so you're going to take that deck, you'll deal it out evenly amongst all the players, and everyone will look at their hands. Whoever has the one ring is automatically Frodo, and then everyone else will go around and pick a character based off of what cards they have. So, like, Bilbo needs to win 3 or more tricks. So you're going to pick him if you've got a lot of high cards or something like that. And, in a lot of trick-taking games, like in Wizard or Spades or Bridge or something, you get dealt your hand and then you'll bid. I think I'll take this many tricks. Which solves a lot of problems in trick-taking games, but it's also really intimidating for new players or something. It's like, how do I look at this and know what number to bid? And when you mess that up, usually it's really bad. So we're able to sort of hide the bid that you're still doing in this game in the characters, where you have fewer choices that you have to make, because it's like, well, I'm going to pick amongst these, and it's also more fun to say I'm Bilbo than saying I bid 4.
Well, and you also have the knowledge that your teammate, like, you're all trying to get all of you to accomplish your goal. So even if you're a little off, there's probably a margin of error, some wiggle room there for you to be bailed out by your teammates.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the first chapter, so we have Bilbo. You could be Pippin, who needs to win the fewest number of tricks, and also gets to pass cards to Frodo, because they're friends. Gandalf just needs to win 1 or more tricks, and the math literate viewers will notice that you can't deal out 37 cards evenly. So every round you have a kind of an extra card that you deal out face up. Well, Gandalf gets to add that to his hand.
To his hand, okay.
So he actually has 1 more card in his hand than everyone else. Gandalf, he knows stuff.
He does. He does.
And then Frodo needs to win ring cards, so it's actually double-sided based off how many players are in the game to make it a little,
Okay.
just to make sure that the difficulty is right for
Right.
each
Yeah.
of those. So,
Yeah.
so you deal out the cards. Everyone picks their characters. I mean, the person with the One Ring has to be Frodo,
Yeah.
which is sometimes a challenge because maybe they don't feel like they can do it, but
Yeah.
gotta figure it out. And then, like I said, some people get to pass cards to each other. But otherwise, you can't really talk about what's in your hand. You have to just
Right.
figure out what everyone else is doing based off of what
No
they're
table
playing and
talk.
what they
Yeah.
no table talk. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And then it plays out like a trick taking game. So one person will lead a card. So I lead the 3 of hills. The next person has to play a hills card if they have it. Otherwise, they play whatever they want. And then once everyone's played one card, the person with the highest card of the suit that the first person played, so I played hills the first time, the highest hills card will win.
Yeah.
You can't play first the rings cards until they get played into another trick, like spades and spades or hearts and hearts. And so, a lot of times, Frodo's like, okay, I'm winning this trick. I hope someone plays, or doesn't have the suit that was led, so they'll play in a rings card, so then I can lead later on. Because when Frodo has the ability to play the 1 of rings, which can win any trick, like that can really get you out of a jam later on in the game.
Yeah.
And so you play it out until everybody's played all the cards in their hand, and then you see if Frodo got enough rings, Bilbo won 3 or more tricks, Gandalf won his 1 or more tricks, and Pippin has the fewest. And everyone has to do their goal for you to be able to.
And then you go on.
Win.
You win, and then you go on to the next chapter. Okay.
Yep. And as I said, sort of as you go through the chapters, we're introducing concepts sort of step by step, so you're able to learn things one thing at a time. But there's always a new challenge sort of to overcome
with each round, with each chapter.
Yeah, and things get pretty crazy too, right? So like chapter 5 is called the Old Forest, right? So that's when people meet Tom Bombadil, and he'll show up. But of course, in the story there, the trees are like attacking the hobbits, right? So you take the forest cards out of the deck and shuffle them up. You add in the Old Man Willow card, and then every trick at the start, before everyone plays their card, you reveal one of the random forest cards. And if the card that wins the trick is lower than that, so if you reveal a 7 and you don't win it with a 7 or an 8, then nobody wins the trick, and the forests just take it away. So it really is like a big kind of twist to gameplay. But also hopefully feels a little like the story, like, oh, the forests are working against us now.
Forest is messing us up here. Interesting. So what other kind of curveballs can people expect? You mentioned people obviously wondering how you're going to do the Balrog. I would assume he's not going to help in any way. So there's that. What kind of curveballs can people, without spoiling too much, but I think that was a really good example. So now I'm curious what else we might have in store.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things that people see later on in the game is where you have a lot of characters are in the chapter, right? So in the first few, it's like, oh, it's just the hobbits or Gandalf, and so you'll just sort of play one hand to complete those chapters. But later on, when you've got like the whole Fellowship and Bill the Pony is all there, we're talking like 10 characters. So it would be sort of sad if you just played with 3 or 4 of them and then moved on. So in those that we call long chapters, to get through the chapter, you'll actually have to play multiple hands. And as you finish characters other than Frodo, you'll sort of set those aside, and then you'll move on to the rest. And it adds a whole kind of additional layer of strategy to the game, where it's not just like, okay, what character do I think I can do right now with my hand, but also maybe we don't want to leave Aragorn and Boromir for the very end because they're both kind of tricky. So maybe it's like, I don't think I can do Aragorn, but maybe I'll try anyway, just to see if we can finish him early. So that's a very fun like bit of strategy that we add to the game. But we also just I think it's fun in any game where people, well, it's like you're going to play this a bunch of times to be able to sort of subvert patterns that
Mm.
people build up over time, right? So, like I said, Frodo's in almost all of the chapters, and so it's really fun when Frodo's not there. So when they get to the prancing pony, you don't use Frodo, you use Mr. Underhill, who's a little bit more challenging. Or after he's attacked on Weathertop and stabbed by the Morgul blade, he gets
Right.
much harder as well.
Oh,
And so we want to like teach people these characters and like, oh, how do we deal with Sam, right? And after you've played it a few times, you're like, okay, this sort of pattern usually works. But it's like, well, let's throw a little wrench in that too, and we have to
yeah.
figure out a new way to get by.
Oh, that's pretty fun though. Yeah, and I presume that, we lose Gandalf at some point, which has got to be a bummer.
Yeah, no, well, and and Gandalf has a couple chapters where in Bilbo's birthday he had to win one or more tricks because
Yeah.
things aren't too hard on Gandalf at that point in the
Right.
story, right?
Yeah.
But like when he's captured by Saruman, and being helped by Radagast and Shadowfax and Gwaihir, he gets an extra card that makes him much harder there as
Mm,
well. So
very cool. Now, what are some of your personal favorite cards in this game, that people can look forward to, whether it's characters or, you know, villains that pop up or mechanics or abilities, what's some of your favorite elements to the game?
yeah, I mean, like it's been really fun designing and developing the game and watching people play and watching people's like preferences for
Mhm.
things, which is like I played through the whole game 2 players with my kid who's 9 right now, and like they always wanted to be Pippin. Like every chance they got, they're like, I want to be Pippin. So that's really fun. I really like being Boromir. Boromir's
Mm.
really challenging. He has to win the last trick every hand.
Oh,
So
interesting.
it's like how do you so you can win other tricks leading up to it, that's fine, but how do you set yourself up to win the very last trick? But you can't win the One Ring, which is the only
Right.
trump card, which would be the only sure thing. But you also don't want Boromir to get the One Ring,
Mm.
right? That's
Yeah.
a big problem.
Interesting.
And Gandalf's probably my favorite character, and so I love all the fun things we get to do to play with Gandalf
Yeah.
as well. So I had a fun time coming up with how is he at the beginning of the game versus like I said, dealing with Saruman versus we have a whole special Gandalf card when you're fighting the Balrog. It
Yeah.
works completely differently.
Oh, interesting. Now, we kind of touched on this earlier, some of the challenges. Did you ever have a time when you're designing this game where you just really came across something that had you stuck for a while? Like, how do we, adapt this chapter or this character, is just a tricky one to figure out how to incorporate.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest design challenge with this game is getting the difficulty right. So it's a
Mm,
cooperative game.
yeah.
So if it's just super easy the whole time, then it gets boring pretty
Right.
fast,
Yeah.
right? It's like, grown-ups don't do 100-piece jigsaw puzzles for that reason, because it's like yeah, you can do it, but it happens super fast, and
Right.
so like you need enough challenge without it being frustrating.
Mm,
And we have to sort of gauge that challenge amongst the deal of the deck as
yeah.
well, right? So it's not like we have like, well, it always plays out the same way.
Right.
So like that's just lots and lots of play testing that I and my great developer Taylor did, of playing it with lots of group of people, lots of different groups of people, and getting feedback. I mean, I think I was making tweaks to the Tom Bombadil chapter, basically as late as my the graphic designers would let me, of trying to, it's like maybe it's a little too hard, maybe it's a little too easy, like just there's lots of things
Right
we can
before
play
they start printing the cards
with.
in mass.
Yeah, yep. So that's definitely the biggest challenge. And just also the longer we worked on the game, the better we got at the game, and so the
Mm,
worse gauge of what's a good challenge it is, right? It's
yeah.
I hope some people play more than I do, but I can't really expect that
Sounds like
people
you've
have
played a
played.
lot. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and so it's like, well, Taylor and I can get through some pretty crazy things, but maybe
Right.
that's the not the right thing.
That's
So
something.
I think
Yeah.
we got there, but that's the biggest challenge with this
That's
game.
something for the rest of us to aspire to get to that level of mastery there.
Yeah,
Now, obviously, we've seen the samples of the cards and everything. Obviously, it's in English, but I understand there's multiple languages. So, what other languages is this coming out in?
yeah. So when the game comes out, it's coming out in I think 15 languages all at
Oh, wow.
once, all at the same time. So in English all over the world, but also in French, German, Italian, Bulgarian, Czech, Hungarian, Korean, Polish, Portuguese, Romanian, Serbian, Spanish, and Ukrainian.
Wow.
So like
Okay.
it's coming out all over the world and in a lot of languages all at once, and maybe other new ones later on down the line too. So,
Very cool. And now the release date, we have that's in mid-January, correct?
yeah, January 17th is the release date, and if you know people go and pick up the game or pre-order the game from like their local hobby store. We're part of a program called Hobby Next,
Mm.
where they get little benefits, and so we've designed an extra chapter for the game, the
Oh, let's pull
Gifts
that up.
of Galadriel.
Oh,
So
interesting.
it's like a whole extra. I think it's numbered like chapter 16 and a half, right?
Okay.
And so it's got a bunch of cards. It's all the gifts that Galadriel gives the Fellowship, right? So
Yeah.
it's the Belt of Gold and the vial with the Light of Arundel in it, and all of that stuff. And so you do a chapter where you don't get to exchange and pass cards, but everyone gets this sort of powerful item that gives them a different benefit as
Very
well.
cool. So that's through Hobby Next. So folks, I'll try to get a link in the description to that.
Yeah,
So
but
so
you just go to your local board game store, whatever that
okay.
is, and ask them about it, and they can track it down.
Very cool.
I spent a lot of time working at game stores throughout my life, and so I'm really glad that we get to support local retailers.
Yeah. Well, and you guys, in between now and then, you guys have a pre-release event at PAX, I believe, right?
Yeah,
Which is coming in December.
yeah. PAX Unplugged, which is December 6th, 7th, and 8th in Philadelphia. We'll have a booth, and we should have early copies for sale there.
Mm.
So
Okay. So if
sure.
so if you're gonna be at PAX, you can get your hands on the game first before anybody else by a little over a month. That's
Yeah,
pretty good.
yeah, and give you something to play over the holidays.
Yeah. Now, obviously, we've been talking about Fellowship of the Ring this whole time. Obviously, the big question is, will can we expect Two Towers and Return of the King down the line?
Yeah, no, we're definitely working on those, and the plan right now is for those to keep coming out, you know, at a good pace. So there'll be more content, and we get to continue the story and just pick up right where we left off, but with some new twists and surprises as well.
Yeah, I'm sure, obviously we won't go into too much detail, but as we were talking about, kind of the gameplay elements of Fellowship, I immediately started thinking like, oh, we're gonna get the Fellowship's gonna break, and then we're gonna have all these new characters coming in, and new areas and everything.
Yep. Yeah. No, it is a lot of fun space to play in, and just
Yeah,
the way the shape of the story changes, which is great as a reader, and challenging as an adapter.
yeah.
Follow
Now
along.
you mentioned some of your favorite characters and stuff from this. Now, obviously looking ahead, you know, I know Fellowship hasn't even come out yet, but just you know, as you start to mull things over in your mind, or do you have a particular affinity for a certain character, or who are you looking forward to in Two Towers or Return of the King, thinking like, oh, that's going to be a fun one to tackle when the time comes?
Oh, I mean, it's very fun just as we've been working on this and sort of internalizing our own internal logic for how things work. And they keep meeting lots of really interesting people. So I'm very very excited for people to see how we tackled Treebeard, who's also one of my favorites. We have some fun ideas.
Oh, cool. Okay. Well, we'll keep an eye out for Treebeard when the time comes. But in the meantime, we've got the Fellowship of the Ring coming out mid January. I believe it January 17th is
January
the
17th is the plan.
January
Yep.
17th. So, and again, Hobby Next, you want to go to your local hobby shop to get that special additional chapter, Gifts of Galadriel. We know, Lord of the Rings fans, we love our extended editions. So a chance to have an extended edition of the Fellowship trick taking game. I'm sure a number of folks will want to take that opportunity for sure. Now I like to close these off with a little bit of rapid fire. I call it rapid fire, but doesn't have to be very rapid. So a few of your favorites. We talked about some of your favorite cards in this deck, but overall, who would you say is your favorite Middle Earth character?
Oh, I mean, Gandalf's definitely my favorite Middle Earth character. It may go back to just being read The Hobbit and then Lord of the Rings, right? And Gandalf's consistent in all of that. Like I just always been my favorite. Always will be.
It's a great choice. It's a great.
Yeah,
I mean, you can't go wrong.
I don't feel like it's an especially cool choice, but it's it is like it's, the heart wants what it wants, right?
Right. Yeah. It's
Wizards.
It's not like a deep cut thing, but like not everything needs to be. Like sometimes the classic answer is a great one. What Middle Earth location would you most want to live in?
I mean, it's tough because I'm very much a city mouse, so there's a part of me that wants to say Minas Tirith, but I do feel like Rivendell's probably the nicer place
Okay.
to just go live. Like that, it definitely seems like that's a lot of sitting around and reading books and eating, and
it seems less crowded than Gondor too.
Yeah, that's true. And I feel like you could really sit around and play cards
that's a good point.
in Rivendell. Like, I feel like if the elves knew about trick-taking games, they
might
really
enjoy that. Might enjoy that strategy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what about Middle Earth location that you would like to visit but not live in?
Oh, I feel like visiting the Glittering Caves like sounds like you get like the little Helm's Deep tour in, and then also get to go see the Glittering Caves. Feels like the good vacation destination.
Yeah. And then last question, favorite Middle Earth book?
I think, I mean, I have been rereading. I've been reading aloud the books to my kid now, and I think just like the first half of Two Towers is my the Three Hunters and Rohan and Treebeard and all of that. Like I just like it just moves so fast. Like I love it, and like you're switching up point of views, and definitely my favorite, always my favorite part.
Okay, that's a good answer. And I just thought of another. This isn't a rapid fire question, but I just thought of the fact that I asked you about sequels to this. I did not ask about a particular prequel to this game, potentially, and you probably won't even tell me. You won't tell me the answer, but just throwing it out there, maybe we go back and do Bilbo's journey at some point in a trick-taking form.
Yeah, it's entirely possible. And Office Dog, this is not our only Lord of the Rings game we're working on, too. I can comfortably say as well. So there's more.
Well, that's a nice
than
little
just
nugget
in the world. Yeah.
Okay, that's a nice little nugget drop there for folks to look forward to. So it's not just the trick taking game. We've got other things to look forward to from you guys.
We're working on it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Bryan, thank you so much for joining. And folks, again, it is the Fellowship of the Ring trick taking game coming out January 17th. So keep keep on the lookout for that. I'll pull the there we go. Pull up the image again. There it is. Got the beautiful stained glass. I think that's a really inspired choice. I know I already said that, but I think the stained glass look is really cool and unique. But yeah, look for that January 17th, guys. Make sure to visit your local hobby shop so you get that extra chapter there. And yeah, Bryan, thanks so much for taking the time and sharing a bit about the game with us today.
Yeah, really, really great to be here. Thank you so much.
All right, folks. Well, we'll have the links in the description so you can check out more about the game. In the meantime, we'll see you next time on Nerd of the Rings.